Hi, welcome to the latest episode of the Wellbeing Show. My name's Noel. I'm your host, and I'm joined by the world-renowned Louise Jones this morning. It's joined us from a busy schedule. I know she's just started loads of extra stuff in her life, so I'm really grateful for you to making time. Just to say, folks, as you know, this is pre-recorded. It goes out on a Wednesday evening usually. So if you're seeing it, this isn't live, although it's recorded as though it is. So don't call me at that point. Send me a message. If you've got some questions, text me or send me a message on WhatsApp. Otherwise, you might get grumpy Noel as opposed to happy Noel. If you interrupt my dinner, for example, you'll definitely get grumpy Noel. So send me a WhatsApp or a message on 07506 319 745. And Louise will put some details on how you can get hold of her, should you wish to. But you can always send messages to me and I can pass them on to her as well. So that's enough of me. Louise Jones, psychotherapist. Is that okay? Would you
Yeah,
call
yeah,
yourself psychotherapist? Yeah.
yeah, I do go by that.
Words are important though, aren't they? I mean, they sort of like the possession of words and all that.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. I go with that. That's what I call myself.
You weren't born a psychotherapist though.
No.
Although sometimes, some days I'm sure it feels that way, right?
So I was born very empathetic as even growing up as a
Well, you
child. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would always look at people in the playground and wonder why everyone was so horrible to everybody else.
right,
It
right.
helped me from a very young age. So
Okay. Okay. And where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I'm in Plymouth.
Okay. That's where you are now.
No, and then we recently, well, in the last couple of years, moved to Cornwall, just not far from here.
You, wow.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
going to
like
end this conversation now. I'm too furiously jealous to continue talking to you. How gorgeous. Whereabouts in Cornwall?
just the other
Roughly. You
side.
don't need to give your address.
Yeah, just the other side of the bridge, really, sort of 10 minutes from the other side of the Tamar Bridge, which is what joins Devon to Cornwall. But the difference from one side of the bridge to the other is huge. It's
Is it
just
really?
for
Yeah.
me, it is. It's really calm. It's really relaxing. We're in a nice little village. It's very community based. Yeah, I love it.
Lovely. So tell me about growing up. You have siblings or what was it? What was your childhood like?
I am the second eldest of four,
Okay.
quite spread out. I've got an older brother who was just, I think, about 16 months older than me. And then I
Right.
have a sister who is 7 years younger than me. And then I have a
Okay.
brother who is 14 years younger than me.
Wow.
So I was, yeah, so for a while it was just me and my elder brother. And
Yeah.
I was very, I think I was born 40, actually. I was very sensible. I was always very grown up. I was always looking out. There was a fair amount of arguing going on in the family constantly. So I think I learned to be hypervigilant and read energy
Yeah.
very, very early on.
To try and predict the unpredictable.
Yeah. To this day, I can read a room. I can sense when energy levels are going up. I can generally feel what's going on with my clients. I often physically feel what's going on with them sometimes.
I mean, it's often, I think, those survival skills can be quite useful in life as well as non-adaptive
Yeah.
and not useful, but they often they can survive simply because they can have benefits. I was always the person on the psych ward that you would want around because I would go ultra calm if something kicked off, which is what I did. That was my survival strategy. So, uh,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was quite useful in trying to figure out who was more dangerous than somebody else, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Much the same actually. I'm quite good in a catastrophe. I go quite calm until afterwards and then I start to feel it. But yeah, in the moment I'm organizational part of me because I'm very into internal family systems. That manager part of me is like on it. Everything else takes a back step. Manager steps forward, organization. Yeah.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned the term, let's talk about that a little bit. We can always go backwards. I will
Oh,
take
yeah,
you
sure. Of
back
course. Yeah.
because it's interesting, I think, how one integrates early experience with current experience and how that looks, particularly in modern sort of psychological framing.
Right.
Because there's old psychological framing, which is more deterministic.
Mhm.
And you're not talking in a deterministic way about your experiences. I know that. But anyway, IFS, internal family systems. I keep hearing this term. What on earth is it?
Okay, so I'm very much in love with IFS currently and have been for the last few years.
Okay.
It's where I see my biggest changes in clients,
Okay.
like rapidly, but it's certainly very, very deep. So we all have parts of ourselves or aspects of ourselves, don't we? Aspects of our personalities. Like, I have this manager that, sets the alarm at night, so I get up in the morning, that makes sure all my stuff, my clients are ready. I have that part of me. I have a part of me that also maybe doesn't want to do it that day because I've not had a good night's sleep or whatever, or there's a part that's feeling anxious. There was a part of me today that was feeling very anxious about doing this show, you know, because it's not something I normally do. I don't normally talk in public.
Because it's new. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not something I'm used to. So we have managers, and they're very good at keeping us going on a day-to-day basis. They do what needs to be done, get the shopping done, all of that sort of thing, get the work done. But we also have other what we would call firefighters. They're still protectors. They protect us from getting things wrong, doing that. And the firefighters might be someone who drinks a lot, or takes drugs, or
Yes.
eats a lot,
Yes.
or is addicted to exercise, or is addicted to computers or porn or whatever it could be. They very often are protecting young vulnerable parts that are holding really deep sorrows, emotions, energies that are maladaptive because they're from very, very young, often, not always, but often. um, and those managers, those firefighters, stop us from going there because it feels dangerous. It doesn't feel safe to go to those really deep parts and talk about them because probably when they were young, it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe to be who you needed to be. We adapt as very young children. We have to adapt for our own survival, don't we? Otherwise, we die.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the nub of it. So, what we do in internal family systems is, there's no bad parts. There's no parts that we want to get rid of. They're all doing a fantastic job protecting us.
Yeah.
Sometimes these protections are maladaptive or have become maladaptive over the time. Originally, those protections would have been useful. But now maybe situations have changed. We're adults, we're living maybe, I'm living in a house, I've got children, I've got dogs, I've got horses, life's different.
Hmm.
Those younger parts of me don't need to feel that anxiety that I felt before coming on. And, I could do work with that and look at where that's come from.
Hmm.
Um, and often we follow the system. There's no forcing, there's no, if I get a client that I very much can feel a protector's not letting me go there. So for example, actually, only a few days ago, um, couldn't really make much progress. And for
Hmm.
me, that means there's a protector saying, we can't go there. It's not
Hmm.
safe. It's
Hmm.
not safe. I don't trust you yet. I
Hmm.
don't trust you. I don't trust the self yet. So talking about self, actually, self is that calm, collected part of us that can cope with everything and anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay, it's the part that embodies compassion, um, clarity, kindness,
Hmm.
all of those things. And that is always available to us. We just can't always see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way that I describe that to, and there's lots of ways, but the way I describe that to my clients is that the sun is always there. We can't always see it, and we haven't always got access to it when it's rainy and cloudy, but it is always there. And sometimes in a moment of peace, and I can guide them through, they get that sense, of self where everything feels okay and you can cope with everything. And that part of self is what helps heal those younger, vulnerable exiles, they're called.
Okay. And are there other types of internal roles that are more adaptive and not exiled and that
Yeah,
work on and develop a new repertoire of roles, as it were?
absolutely. And also, what we want to really try and do is to get to those exiles, find what they're carrying, and maybe that is shame, maybe it's fear, maybe it's lots of different things.
Yeah.
Hear their story, acknowledge their story,
Yeah.
and then we allow the self to go back to that younger part and give them what they needed at that time that they didn't get. So
Okay.
maybe they needed comforting, maybe they needed understanding, maybe they
Yeah.
needed something completely different. And then they feel ready eventually to let go of what they've been holding on to for all these years.
Yeah.
And they can bring in something else. That might be joy, that might be creativity, it might be playfulness, it might be, could be anything.
I was going to ask whether those roles they have maladaptive, but also adaptive potential, I guess, because they've adapted once and they can adapt again, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They can adapt again and take on what they'd like to do. Because often these roles, particularly the protective roles, even before we reach the exiles, are exhausted from doing the job they've been doing.
Yes.
Yeah, but they don't know any other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's slowly, the biggest thing with IFS for me is taking the time to get the trust for
Yeah.
the parts of you to trust me and for the parts of you to trust yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it all opens up and it can be
And
transformed.
what's the importance of the role of somebody external like you? I mean, obviously, you're trained and qualified, you have specific skills, but it's also the fact is you're a human being. We could train a machine. What's the difference between a machine and a person?
Well, for me, I work very intuitively.
Okay.
I think I always have been very intuitive from a very young age, and there isn't a right or wrong way of doing it. I think you could go into several different IFS sessions and experience it slightly differently, even though the way we do it is similar in terms of do this, do this, do this.
Yeah. I
Um,
guess what I'm asking is this, could somebody, for example, just read a book on IFS and get it? Or is it important to sort of work with somebody who's
I think
trained?
I think there's a case for both in my
Okay.
experience because I think most people, and I find it easier when you're being guided by someone else.
Okay. Okay.
So, there is a case for that. You certainly, there are lots of books around that you can look into and follow that and do it yourself. But I don't think many people
Yeah.
are able to do that. I think it's just a lot easier with a guide and someone holding space for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's that feeling of safety. If there isn't that feeling of safety, that's not going to happen anyway.
Okay. Great. So let's go back to Louise before
Hmm.
she was an expert in these things, and you're growing up, and we're going to go back in time a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I think there's an interesting narrative there potentially around like this is how we are as human beings, and what you're discussing is we carry stuff from the past, we can work it, and we carry it differently going forwards.
Yeah.
And that's really an interesting way of thinking about the life experience. Whereas I think originally psychology, a la Freud, etc., it was almost like you're going to do these, understand this past because that's who you are and that's it. But now it's very much about change and new tools and new resources and differences. Um, and also understanding the connections between who we were and who we are is quite useful, I think. So you were growing up in a situation in which you had to have some elements of yourself emerge that later on in life you understood were maladaptive or didn't want to change without help, is another way of thinking about it. So my understanding is as human beings, of course, we are adapting or changing all the time, but then sometimes things happen where we maladapt, and those maladaptions don't change naturally, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Does
they
that
don't.
make sense?
Yeah, that does. I think it does. But they can change through therapy, I
Yeah,
think, to
great.
be more adaptive. It's looking at it's making I was talking parts, sorry, parts understand that it is no longer necessary to behave in that way or to react and respond in such a
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Things are different.
yeah,
Often parts of us are not, if I say to a client, how old does that part think you are? And it might say 8. And the client's like, I don't know where that came from. I don't know why it thinks I'm 8. So these young parts don't necessarily think there's an adult around.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
don't know if that makes
when
sense.
you were sort
When
of
I was
growing
younger.
up and you have
Yeah.
this sibling thing and you're
Yeah.
mature and responsible and empathic.
Mm.
So tell us a bit more about that story. So you go to school, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell
Yeah.
us about that. What was that like for you? Normal school, average?
Um, when I went to school, I hated school.
Did
Well,
you? Right.
yeah. Well, I was 4. I probably wasn't 5 till the April, so I was probably quite young. I was also born 3 or 4 weeks early, so I was very, very little.
Okay.
I was quite ill after about 3 months. I was really quite ill as a baby. Um, so yeah, I don't know why, but I had a deep attachment to being at home. I needed to feel safe. I needed to be at home. So going to school was terrifying for me. I
Yeah.
mean, the memory of going to school is crying every single day.
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And
Was
that's
that because of the other kids or the teachers or just not being at home? It was just all a bit too much.
not being at home, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you settle in eventually? Did you start to enjoy school or was it always a bit problematic for you?
Interestingly, I mean, maybe it was partly the school I went to as well, but when my sister came along, so I was 7 when she was born, we changed schools and that changed everything for me.
Is it?
So, I was probably holding on to the fact that I hated school,
Yeah.
but actually, as soon as I went to another school, I loved it. I loved school from that moment on, really.
Yeah. That's an interesting almost metaphor, isn't it? For, sometimes situations get stuck, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And had I stayed there, I probably would have been miserable all the way through, even though it probably wasn't to do with the school. I think there were bits to do with the school. There
Yeah.
were bits that
I'm
weren't.
sure there were bits to do with the school if you were just miserable. I mean, it's interesting because why I'm interested is because for me, school was an escape. I had a highly dysfunctional childhood and family, and actually, school gave me things I could understand. There were rules, and I got rewards for certain outputs, and teachers mostly were relatively understandable. And that was very different to my home life, which didn't make any sense at all. It was all just a bit weird. Um, but your response to having some slight issues at home was that, like, you wanted to understand what was happening, be in control of it, and stay at home, as it were.
When I was young, when I was very young, 3, 4, 5, definitely, that's where I felt I just didn't feel safe out in the world. It wasn't just, I don't even know if it was home, it was being somewhere that was familiar. I was never that child that would wander off. You know how all children wander off
Yeah.
in the supermarket, on the beach, they disappeared, don't they? No, I never did that. I was never out of sight.
Okay. Okay.
I was that child. But also at the end of primary school, I'm of that age where we all took the 11 plus.
Yeah. 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 I do remember. I never took it, but I remember it still existed when I was there. Yeah.
We went to grammar school or whether we went to secondary school,
Yeah.
what would have been called a secondary modern school. And my brother, being a year ahead of me, had sat the 11 plus, passed, gone to the grammar school, got given a 10-speed racer for it, blah, 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 blah. I didn't pass.
Right.
I cried and cried and cried and cried and cried that I lost my voice for several days.
Wow.
And that was a massive thing. It's not now, it's something I've worked through, but it was a massive thing for years of feeling a complete failure, feeling that I'm not good enough, feeling that I can't succeed in anything.
Yeah.
I would, if I was lucky, I would get a job at Tesco's stacking shelves. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's all I thought I could ever do.
Yeah. But in comparison to having a brother that was very successful, that must have been quite,
At the
because that's a
time,
bit large, isn't it? There's a comparison to make.
I got this big
Yeah.
10-speed racer. I was desperate for a 10-speed racer. I didn't obviously get anything.
Yeah. That was sort of like me and my brother. I was very good at school simply because I really liked it. I think it was a safe place. My brother wasn't so much. He was the opposite. His response was to kick against the authority, sort of like that, which is that was his life. He carried on with that. I'm telling you. I was the goody two shoes who did what I was told, because that made me feel good. That was it. And it's interesting to sort of be able to think about these things, I think, as an adult and no longer be in it. I don't feel like I'm in that
No,
anymore.
no, 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 no.
Reflect upon that and go,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's where therapy is so good, isn't it? You're
Yeah,
not in it anymore, but you can look back at it and see what it was. It becomes in the past as
yeah,
opposed to current.
yeah. And I sort of the way I feel about it is I've got all that stuff, which I can be if it's useful. I don't have to either have it or not have it. It's just a capacity, set of capacities. And sometimes being a goody two shoes is a really good idea in life.
you out of the limelight, doesn't it? And I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
what using by
But as you know from me, I am in the limelight.
well, I know you are, yeah.
So I had to develop a new set of skills, which actually I got from doing theatre, which was,
Yeah.
quite a useful set of skills to learn. But I was that boy. I remember I went to Real recently. I remember that's where I got lost from my mum as a child. I got separated on Real Breach, and that was like a really dreadful day for me. So, though I had both elements, I think, both the clingy,
Yeah.
wanting to know where things were, and then also that quite anarchic energy that I think I got from my brother. We were sort of very much inseparable as as young kids. We went around together. We were stunt men and stuff. Sort of
Boys, you're boys,
quite feral, I would say, quite feral.
you're just boys, I think.
So
I
the
have,
second school that you went to is much more pleasant and helpful to you. Is that right?
yeah, I mean, it took me, it sounds really ridiculous, but it took me till about what they call now year nine, so 3 years in, to realize that I wasn't stupid.
Ah, wow.
I remember distinctly being in a biology lesson because I never answered any questions, in
Just
case
be
any.
aware of your arms on the table because it's rocking your. Uh,
Sorry.
it's all
Yeah,
right. No, it's just rocking your camera and distracting.
yeah. Um, yeah, I remember distinctly sitting in a biology lesson thinking, but I know these answers.
Really? How
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, I can remember the moment. And that's when I started to stick my hand up, started to engage, started to be, and then
Wow.
realized actually I'm okay. And
And the interesting phenomenon here, and I think you've probably seen it a lot in your practice that you've just described, is that moment of realization that often happens when the story changes.
yeah.
Because you had that knowledge before you realized it, but you just couldn't access it. And
Yeah.
then you realized it and then you could access it. And it's not like suddenly somebody downloaded a load of knowledge into your head at that moment.
No, no, absolutely. The knowledge was there. I just didn't yeah, I just yeah.
Develop the emotional psychological capacity to access it,
Yeah.
which is often something I see quite a lot in clinical practice, and I guess you do as well.
Mm.
What do you think tipped it for you at that moment?
In that particular moment, I think it was just the fact that no one was answering any questions and I knew the answers to them. And it was, I literally remember looking around thinking, why is no one answering? Okay, I'll answer. And from then on, I just got the confidence of being to be able to do that. And yeah, I did, I did really well.
So,
My mother always says you've done really well considering, which is hilarious.
and so then school became a bit more manageable and more interesting and
I
more
loved
helpful
school.
for you.
Yeah, at that stage, I really loved school. I thrived. I managed to, pretty much get on with most people. There were people I avoided, but again, I was hyper vigilant to who to avoid and when to avoid.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was very good at that. Very, very good at that.
Can you hear the clings from my messaging?
No, no.
Right. I can hear them. I've just switched it off. I've got the do not disturb thing on, but it doesn't seem to be working. It's annoying me. Just switched it off.
no.
Um, all right. And so then you settle into school, it becomes much more helpful and useful to you. Do you get a pleasure from knowledge? Is that where you got a pleasure from knowledge?
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Always
Um,
to do something.
well, if I could give anybody a gift, anybody, it would be enjoy learning. I mean, it's just such a amazing gift to have, I think.
Yeah. And I did. I think my sixth form was quite difficult. I'd had a difficult split up from a boyfriend at that time, and that completely floored me for about a year. So
Yeah.
A levels weren't, the best. They weren't great, but I still went and, I did a degree in maths and economics.
Right.
That, yeah, it's a strange route, isn't it?
I'm gonna say that's not connected with your current choice. It's
No,
interesting.
no.
So
I think at 18, you don't know what you want, do you? I mean, I don't think therapy and certainly trauma was particularly well known or big, certainly where I was living at that time. It wasn't even an option. It wasn't even something I mean, I was definitely was always wanting to help people. That was just who I was. So, but they were my best A levels, so that's what I did. I just
then did you go to college after that? Was that
I
the
went to university. went to university, and then again, I finished my course, not really knowing what I wanted to do. Both my parents are teachers, so I thought, "Oh, that's what I'll do."
All right. Yeah. Back in
So
the day, I mean, it's interesting now because I think there's a lot of pressure on young people to know.
yes,
Actually, I think our generation was sort of lucky in that, well, certainly I was the first person in my family to go to university, so I didn't have to know anything. It was just that was an achievement, full stop.
yeah,
I
yeah,
certainly had no idea of a career or anything like that. Whereas I think young people now, it's something they're shoehorned into knowing what they want, uh,
yeah.
at their O levels and A levels and university. And I think I'm not sure I know what I feel about that, to be honest.
I feel, I mean, it's one of the reasons I left teaching. I
Yeah.
love what I do now. I feel like this is what I was meant to do. This is what I should have done all along.
Okay.
But what drove me to leave teaching is there's so much pressure. It's like prisons now. Now,
Right.
this may be a very controversial thing to say.
No, no, it's interesting to hear. Yeah.
I think if mine, I mean, mine are all adults now. My boys are all adults. But if they were in school, I'd be absolutely homeschooling them at this point.
Right. Would you?
Yeah, absolutely.
How strongly you feel about it. So you went to university, what, you did a teaching degree or
Oh, I did maths and economics, just a
okay.
and then I went and did a postgrad teaching qualification.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved it. I loved being in the classroom. I loved being with the kids. I loved, it's the same kind of feeling when you get a breakthrough with a client as you do with a child in a classroom.
I was going to say, I don't think there's that much difference between, I mean, there's a lot of crossover, I think, between teaching and therapy because a lot of therapy is about teaching people stuff anyway.
A lot of mine would say they got therapy as well as maths, to be
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What sort of age were you teaching? What sort of age group?
secondary age, so 11 to 18s.
Yeah. And we know, don't we, from research that attachment processes open up in children at school. And certainly I know from my background in social services, school is seen as a protective factor in children that are in damaging homes. And school can repair that simply by having a good teacher relationship. That's what happened for me when I was at school.
I think it's very different now. I think there will obviously that I know a lot of teachers and individually they're wonderful. It's not coming from the individual members of staff, it's coming from way higher up than that. And there's so much pressure on exams in primary school,
All
you
right,
know.
let's try this then. So for a while you were very happy teaching and you were able to teach in this more holistic, humanistic manner. You'd form relationships with children, I guess, and you'd become their personal coach and stuff like that. That's what happened to me when I was a kid at school. My teachers became much more than just receptacles of knowledge and all that sort of stuff. We had relationships, they helped me, they gave me advice and guidance. We had lots of activities. When did that begin to change in teaching and then push you out of it, as it were, towards more therapy training?
I mean, I've probably been out of teaching about 15, 16 years now. Um, so a while ago. And it just started to become about boxes that you could tick as opposed to the
Cool.
children.
So the pressure was on the professionals to demonstrate outputs,
Yeah.
and that what that looks like to a child is, in your experience.
It just feels like a lot of pressure to
Right.
them, and when you're under pressure, you can probably think of a time when you were in school and someone, what, no, what's the answer? You shut down, don't you? Your amygdala fires up, your prefrontal cortex goes, I can't think. And we're doing that to children all the time currently, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Oh, you wouldn't be the only person who believes that. I don't think it's just a belief, Louise.
no,
I
yeah,
think there's a relatively large body of knowledge that suggests that that is the case.
yeah, it is
Like
the case.
national curriculum when that came in and stuff like that. Now, I understand and I totally accept that as a society, we want schools to perform, we want
Yeah,
some sense of outputs and stuff like that. But unlike you, I think we've gone far too far down that, and schools have become politicized in the party political sense, that
yeah.
the political careers hinge upon those getting those A levels. Um, and when a politician's afraid of losing their income, kids are right at the bottom. Their needs.
Yeah. It's counterproductive, isn't it? It's counterproductive at the end of the day
Yeah.
because that, I mean, kids necessarily are that they'll push back, won't they? That's in the nature of being a child and an adolescent. They push back. So all we're doing is trying to clamp them down even further, and they're just pushing. And it's like, well, the behavior is this, and this, so we'll just clamp down even further. But it's counterintuitive to me. It doesn't work. I mean,
No, it
they're
doesn't make any sense to me either as well. Yeah.
you know what I mean? They're not allowed to do anything. If they're wearing the wrong coloured socks, they're put in isolation for the day. And they're allowed to see or speak to anyone for a day for
Yeah.
stupid things like that.
Yeah. 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 No, I totally agree. But that sort of grated upon you and what? And then you had like, how did you make that decision? I want to go into these, like,
Yeah.
because you could have made the decision, I don't want to have anything to do with helping. I've had enough of it. I'm going to go off into banking, but you didn't do that.
No, because it wasn't the helping that I didn't like. It was the
Right.
control that I didn't like. And
Okay.
that we was having on the kids. And so anyway, I had an opportunity to, I've always loved horses. So I had an opportunity to do a course in equine assisted learning and human development. So
Okay.
that level 5 qualification. And that was done over about 18 months. And I used to do that sort of part time. So I'd still be part time teaching and part time doing this, going up and down to the course. Um, and that was the initial, I don't need to teach, I can do this because it's very
So
difficult.
equine assisted learning
Yeah.
is, tell us about that, what that is.
So horses are horses are prey animals. So the horses are very sensitive to emotions, energies for
Yeah.
their own survival, not just theirs, but everyone else's as well.
Yeah.
So being with horses, you have to be really authentic when you're with a horse. You have to be in your body. You have to know what's going on in your body. You have to be aware of all of that. And if you're not and you don't, you won't get anything from them. They won't come near you. So, you can learn, you can embody a lot of what goes on with them, and you can learn a lot about yourself through that process.
Right. Right. So you become aware of your relationship to them and how they're tuned into you. And if you want to get close to them, you have to manage that to some
Yeah,
extent, I guess.
learn how to regulate. Yeah,
Right. Right.
absolutely.
So it's a very practical thing. And would this be used to help kids in learning who have found it difficult to learn? Is that was the idea of the training?
Kids, adults, people with trauma, it is really good. I have now got to the stage where I feel, because I have horses, but I feel that I'm not sure I need to find another way to do it, which is why I'm doing this new course, which we'll talk about in a second. But
Yeah.
I don't want my horses to be a tool.
Yeah. No, I
They
get that.
they
I
are
get that.
sentient
Yeah.
beings. I do not want to say, right, you're working with this very traumatized person. It just doesn't feel right. But it was a
Yeah.
great learning curve. I learned a huge amount about myself. What I also learned was I want to work with people who've got really deep trauma, but now I don't know what I don't know.
Okay. Right. Okay.
So it's not safe working with people like that at that
Yeah, yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. No, good. Well, that's really wise on your part to go, I don't know enough. There are many people who sort of would rather arrogantly plow on without that knowledge. So did that then make you think, I need to learn something more?
Yeah, and that's what led me to do my postgrad diploma in PTSD and trauma.
Okay.
So, and it was, we did so much in that. It was harrowing. It was it
Yeah,
was very hard work on so many levels, emotionally, everything. It was
yeah,
hard.
yeah. And so what did you cover in that postgrad work?
Everything. Um,
I'm thinking particularly because I think some of these words are really important, Louise. That's why. So, particularly, what was the curriculum? What were the modalities? What were the ideas? Because for you, they're natural, they're just embedded as part of you. But for lots of people, they won't be. And my experience, I don't know what yours is, but my experience is often people survive this stuff, as you know, from internal family systems, that they're in this survival mode and it's working for them, but they don't know that there could be something else.
yeah.
And actually naming this stuff is really helpful, I think, because then somebody can go, it doesn't have to be like this. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So,
Yeah.
So the curriculum, what do you cover? What sort of issues? So PTSD is what? What is that? Tell me about it.
So post-traumatic stress disorder. So post-traumatic stress disorder is where it's very specific in what. So I'm going to try not to use too many letters here. The DSM-5, so the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is an American thing.
Yeah.
It's written in America. America use it. North America use it.
It's a
So
book of symptoms and treatments.
yeah,
It
yeah,
lists the symptoms and lists the treatments for it. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And diagnoses what symptoms are, what they are. So
So
they
it has
might.
a diagnosis called post-traumatic stress disorder. And what does it say it is? And what did you learn about it? And what is it not? And what is it in your
There's
experience?
a difference between that and what people nowadays will call complex PTSD.
Okay.
Okay, so PTSD is often just a one-off, it can be numerous one-off events that have been life-threatening, could be, serious harm, or it can be sexual violence.
Yeah.
They're usually one-off events, but they can be multiple one-off events, but
And
just
there are
not.
sort of symptoms associated with them. What would they be? What types of things might people experience?
Okay, so if, there's loads of symptoms, but I generally go by some red flags, and some of the red flags are
Right.
avoidance. One of the biggest things is avoidance.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Be avoiding thinking about, talking about, or doing anything that reminds you of this frightening experience that you've had. Okay, that's one of the big ones. A second one is you might not be doing activities that you used to like and love. You might be finding it difficult to relate to people. That's the second one. I mean, there are lots of others, but these are my three big ones. And the third one is you're likely to be getting repeated, distressing, intrusive
Yeah.
thoughts, memories, dreams. You may get flashbacks. That's, fairly, people know what flashbacks are.
Yeah.
Those are my big three red flags, really. But there are lots of others. You can be hypervigilant, you can be jumpy, you can be engaging in reckless behavior, you can have changes about who you think you are, about the world, really negative thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we could go on, couldn't we, really, as you
And
know?
so I think it is quite important because some people can poo-poo this stuff, but actually knowledge is really helpful. And for somebody living with this stuff, giving them the knowledge to then think, maybe I can go and talk to somebody about this. Maybe I can go find out a bit more about it. And
Yeah,
that's really, I think, the empowerment of that, right? And
yeah.
then you said something about complex PTSD. What's
Yeah.
that?
I just wanted to say that PTSD is generally fear-based. We
Okay.
talk about being
Yeah,
fear.
yeah, 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 yeah. Great.
Quite often it can be fear-based, but it's quite often shame-based as well.
Ah,
It comes about from a repeated experience that you don't feel able to escape from. So that could be domestic violence, that could be childhood abuse, that could be being in a war zone. But it's when you feel you can't escape from it and it's ongoing that can. So interestingly, complex PTSD isn't in the diagnostic statistical
no,
map.
that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The European and the rest of the world one, isn't it? The
Yeah,
the
yeah. The ICD is definitely in there now.
11, but it's not in the DSM-5.
Yeah.
So yeah, but the symptoms pretty much are the same, and the treatment is similar, really, if not the same. But so
But
it's
it's interesting, I think, that, and there's a gender difference here in terms of diagnosis. And I think that's partly what we're talking about. So historically, we've thought of post-trauma symptoms much more associated with what blokes do, army, all that sort of stuff, and adult blokes. So that's where the diagnosis all come from,
yeah,
and
yeah,
really from soldiers and all that sort of stuff. But now we understand that heightened distress faced with fear of ending of life, either me or mum, doesn't really matter when
yeah,
I'm
it
a
can
kid.
be
You
your
know what I
partner,
mean? It's
or
like,
it can
yeah,
be
literally.
someone that's close to you. It doesn't.
And this sort of definition of complex is embracing a lot more in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of life experience, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
And so it's really important, and I think because of that, that we help people. But then, and what do you think about this idea that everything is trauma, which is how it often gets presented? What's your feelings and thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting. I think that as an adult, it's very easy to poo-poo what a younger child felt in
Yeah,
that. And I think, say just a simple example of falling off a bike. Say maybe you were 4 and you fell off the bike. Now, to us as an adult, that doesn't feel like trauma, it's life, isn't it? But if that child didn't get any support or any looking after, or that could be quite traumatic. They could be holding that still.
Sure, sure.
So I think we've got to be difficult. We've got to be careful not to poo-poo people's trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, okay. And then the idea of resilience and where that comes from, because often that's the thing that's thrown out. Oh, well, when I was younger, somebody would punch me. It didn't matter. That's nonsense. It did matter. But
Because that's probably why
what does resilience? Sorry?
it does matter because that's probably why you got road rage
That's
now.
right, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just
I think the evidence shows, doesn't it? And I believe this, and I've seen this, that if there was at least one person in your life that was supportive and holding and understanding and you felt safe with, that can make a massive
yeah.
difference.
I mean, that's what I got from school, from my teachers at school. That's literally what happened. I had a really very scary childhood at home, but my teachers were not. They were the opposite, and that really transformed it for me.
And I think that is all it takes. That's what gives that resilience. If there's nothing from anybody, that's where we've got problems.
So this is the key point, and I want to underscore this so that people hear it. Resilience comes from feeling loved and held and nurtured and cared for. It doesn't come from being frightened,
Yeah.
right? That's what you're saying to me.
That's what I believe, yeah.
Well, that's what the evidence says. I mean, it's like just so that people understand that because they confuse shocking events with resilience. No, resilience is the capacity to manage that shocking event more effectively.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
not to say it won't shock, it could do, but if you're more resilient with it, maybe the shocking event has less of a
Mm.
negative impact and less adaptation on our part to it.
And it's interesting, isn't it, how, different people can experience the same event
Yeah.
and react in completely different ways.
I
And that
remember you'll find this amusing. I found it really insightful and amusing. There was a radio interview, and the head of the army was being interviewed about something, and it was around trauma. And the interviewer said, "Now that we know what are the predispositions towards developing PTSD, can't you screen people out at the interview process from the army?" And he said, "Well, I could do that, but I wouldn't have an army."
yeah,
So it's like absolutely right.
isn't it?
So I don't think that's right. Um, what else did you do on this course that was sort of eye-opening for you? Like PTSD, what else were you looking at?
I mean, we looked a little bit into the neuroscience of it, not too deeply because we're not neuroscientists, but we had to do some work on the neuroscience, what the brain does, the different parts of the brain.
Oh,
What did we do? We did a lot of CBT based stuff. We did something called cognitive processing therapy, which is, CBT, but CBT, CBD, T even.
yeah.
But it's aimed specifically at trauma.
Okay.
And that was really interesting. People have to kind of write about their experience, then they have to look at what's called stuck thoughts.
Yeah.
Things that they're stuck on, and we then look at all the different evidence and look at it from lots of different angles, and we did
So
lots of
like doing the classic thought records, but focusing on the trauma stuff instead.
stuff, and based around themes of I might not remember all the themes, so there's themes around safety, trust, self-esteem, intimacy. I think there's one other which I can't quite remember, but there's themes, and we look into each of those themes in CPT.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did a lot of those types of things. We did prolonged exposure, we did narrative exposure.
And exposure is the opposite of avoidance.
Yeah, yeah,
Managing fear, developing the emotional tools to manage fear.
yeah, yeah. And I think before you do that, when I start with anybody, and I love IFS, and IFS does say they don't do any of this, but for me, I have to do this because this is just the way I work. I like to get all the evidence in. I like to assess them with every possible tool I have available to me. We do a lifeline.
In your camp, actually, Louise.
we
Why throw the baby out with the bathwater is
Yeah,
my view.
we do a lifeline, and that's, you know, when I was seeing, I see people only online now, but when I was seeing people in person, we'd get out a piece of rope, we'd lay this piece of rope out, they'd
Love
have
those techniques. They're great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
pots of flowers and stones
yeah.
and candles, and you know, and that was just a real process in itself for people,
Super.
actually.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that often I think that just helps people itself as a sort of
It really
exercise.
does. It
Yeah,
really does,
yeah,
just
yeah.
in itself without even looking at it.
And you
Um,
did something, I think you did something quite weird. It sounds weird. EMDR, is that you do something weird like
yeah, I do EMDR. I have done EMDR. I do EMDR. Eye
what on
movement.
earth is that weird sounding
Yeah,
thing?
so that's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So
Mouthful. That's
yeah,
a
you know,
mouthful.
bilateral movement of your eyes going back and forth. I think we don't really know why it works, but it seems to release that deep held sort of trauma and tension, and put it in the past as opposed to it being in the present.
Yeah.
It seems to do that quite well. So that's kind of, you know, and you can do it with tapping. It doesn't have to be your eyes. It can be sounds. So I've also done something called brain spotting, which is
Yeah.
developed from EMDR, but
What's that when it's at home?
what's that one is that? So that basically, in a nutshell, is where we look affects how we feel.
Right.
Now we do this all the time. If I said to you, you know, what's the color of your front door? You may know it straight away, but you might move your eyes to think about it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I think everybody knows that we move our eyes to access different areas of our
Yeah,
brain.
we do.
So, you know, what in a brain spotting session, rather than just going back and forward like this that you do in EMDR, I would kind of map as you follow a pointer. I would map what's going on with you. You may blink, your expression may
Oh,
change
yeah,
slightly.
yeah, yeah,
We'd
yeah.
do cross, we'd do up, we'd do, you know, and we'd find a spot that, so you could find a spot where you can access a particular memory or
Yeah.
trauma. And you can also find another spot that's not quite so activating, but you can
Yeah.
still get there. So that's, in a nutshell, that's,
Brilliant, brilliant. And it's really interesting because all these are about like techniques that have been developed to work with those experiences that don't allow us to adapt
yeah,
so
yeah.
that we can begin to adapt again. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because often these, you know, the way trauma is stored in the brain, isn't it? It's very haphazard, it's stuck. It's not, it doesn't make a clear narrative.
No, that's the whole point about it.
That's what we're
One
talking.
wishes one could just write it down
Yeah.
and have a prescription that would sort it out. It's not been my experience so far, though.
No, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't think prescription. Well, anyway, let's not go down that road. That's
Yeah,
that's a,
yeah, yeah.
that's a whole other podcast.
Get off that soapbox.
I remember going to a talk by someone, um, I think his name was David Trickery, and
What a
he
name.
talked about, yeah, I know, he talks about trauma as imagining you've been given this duvet that's covered in thorns and it's going to hurt you. So you've been told to shove it away in the wardrobe as quickly as possible and
Yeah,
shut the doors. But what happens? It just keeps bursting open because you haven't put it away properly. So you know, the idea of taking it out carefully with help and organizing it so that it can be folded up nicely and neatly and put back in the cupboard, so it doesn't keep exploding out on
yeah.
you at random times without you really knowing when or where.
And it then becomes a useful duvet as well, rather than something that hurts you.
Yeah, especially if
If,
you can take
if you,
things.
that's right. If you ever need some warmth from a duvet, you've got one available. So that
I don't
sounds
know.
like a really useful thing to have in my life. Yeah.
I
Um,
quite like that.
and so you learning all this stuff. Now, the interesting thing is you're doing this as a postgraduate course of like a year or something,
It was about 18 months.
which is, I think, is fantastic because I personally I prefer that approach to things. I get a little bit concerned about some training that takes 3 or 4 years. It's almost like a conversion to it. You sort of have to invest so much of yourself in it. How could any bit of your training be wrong? Do you know what I mean? It's like I get a bit concerned about that, but that's another story. That's my soapbox. Let me get off it.
Okay.
And so, but it is interesting that we have enough psychological science, if you like, now that we can get condense these training. They are tools and resources we can give to people that they can then take and help people in the real world. right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to get back on my soapbox again
Go
because
on.
one of the other things on our curriculum was a huge amount of regulation, how to regulate
Yeah,
people, how
the body. So go from dysregulated to
yeah, exactly, to stabilize them initially, make them feel safe,
yeah,
and then lots of tools for regulation because not one tool fits everybody, not one therapist fits everybody.
that's right. Yeah,
But what I really think would be helpful coming from a teaching background is that's what we need to be teaching our kids.
yeah. I agree. And to some extent, it is happening with polyvagal. I've seen that
Yeah,
happening a little bit in schools, but knowledge about the central nervous system,
yeah,
the active and the relaxed, and
yeah,
the relationship between two, and actually with an emphasis, I think, on teaching the downside because
absolutely.
we are so active.
Yeah, and kids
Everything is
particularly are
activating us, isn't
very
it?
active anyway and very easily,
Yeah.
bubble over quickly, don't they? But we need to
My
be
experience of kids is when you give them this knowledge, they love it. They love learning this stuff, and
they
then
do it, and
they just apply it.
yeah. And unlike adults, they immediately, a bit like animals, they take it on board because they
And
believe
they just do it. Yeah. Yeah.
it works. So they're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's
No, I'm totally with you. That's not a soapbox. That's just really sensible. It should be part of the curriculum. I think in some schools it is, but it needs to be, really hammered home that this would save a lot of problems. It would solve a lot of problems.
fine, wouldn't it? In terms of people being put in prison and all of
Yeah.
that, we haven't given these people any skills as children.
All cortisol, mate. It's all cortisol. If we can reduce cortisol and adrenaline, we're better off, without a doubt, right? Um, okay, so I get that, and then you start your practice, you discover IFS. We've got some sense of what that is from you. We've got this sense that you are never going to stop learning. And that's good because that is a message across to the world. Never stop learning, right?
There is something new to learn, isn't there?
Absolutely. And now, because we're getting towards the end of the show, um, now you've decided to start a new form of training. Tell us a little bit about that. I know you haven't really started it and you can't really advocate for it, but it's interesting to me that you've decided to go and do this. Tell us a little bit about it if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
So it kind of links a little bit with the training I did with the horses.
I thought, yeah, that's when you told me about it, I thought that sounds like there's echoes
So,
there.
animals are a big thing for me. I have two very exuberant German shepherds, one particularly so. And actually, I wanted to find really kind, gentle ways to help her regulate her
Oh, right. Yeah.
bit off the planet. Um, and I came across this a few years ago. It's called the trust technique, and it's by a man called James French.
Yeah.
And it is to do with the fact that animals and humans, we share emotions. We share emotions. They pick up on ours, we pick up on theirs. And that if we can regulate, and it's a really good regulation tool actually, regulate ourselves down into a peaceful, calm, present moment, the animals pick up on that and can rest and relax and release any stuff they're holding as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's about that, and yeah, I am right at the beginning of it, but I have practiced some of it with mine. My female German Shepherd does not possess an off switch. But when I do this with her, I can get her lying down and asleep within 5 minutes.
And your hope is at some point, at the moment it's working with animals, at some point you hope that you can translate it and transform it into work in your as
Yeah,
a
and that's
therapist with
yeah,
humans as well.
absolutely, and that's actually their bigger vision as well.
Right, right. And before people think that's off the wall, it's like there's a very famous book written by a very famous trauma specialist. I can't remember his name, about the tiger shaking.
Oh, Peter Levine.
Peter Levine, who noticed that animals manage trauma very well in very natural ways. So the question he sort of asked was, why don't tigers have PTSD? He didn't really ask that question, but it's
Yeah,
it's a reasonable question to ask. Why do only humans get it? And the conclusion he came to is that they have remembered, they maintain autonomic processes that allow them to process fear and trauma. And that somehow we seem to have forgotten it as humans. And
yeah,
so it's also they have different ways of doing it that are useful for us to know as well. And that relationship between natural and human, re-establishing that,
Yeah,
for me, inherently therapeutic, I would say.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've ever noticed dogs. So I'm very aware of this now, but dogs, if they come across something stressful or worrying, once they've calmed down, once the nervous system's beginning to calm down, they do a massive shake
Yes, that's
and
right. Yeah.
shake it off,
And
you know.
that's one of the things he talked about, wasn't it? That shake. And it's a technique that we use with people as well.
And
Uh,
I say that to my clients because quite often they will say, "Oh, I feel like I need to do this." And I'm like, "Do it then.
Do it. Get on with it. That's right. Jump up and down.
Do
Shake
what you
yourself
need."
out. Absolutely. Um, we are unfortunately at the end, I'm afraid, Louise. What a fascinating story. As I've said to you before, I want you to come back once you've done the training. We'll learn more about this technique from you and also just catch up with your practice because it's fascinating how it grows and develops. Um, I know you're not taking a huge number of people on at the moment, but should people wish to contact you, have you got a website where they can get hold of you?
Yeah, I have just actually thrivetraumasolutions.co.uk.
Thrive Trauma Solutions .co.uk. So Thrive Trauma Solutions is one word.
Yeah, yeah.
Super. All right. Look, it's you stay there. It's been fantastic to have you on. Thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it. I know your life is really busy at the moment. Thanks. I hope you got as much insight as I have from that. Do reach out and check out Louise's website, Thrive Trauma Solutions, because there'll be lots of information on there, full stop. Whether you want to use her as therapist or not, there'll be fascinating stuff on it just to read. And if I can encourage you one thing today, the one lesson I would take is love learning and keep learning. That's what Louise embodies for me. So lovely to have you all here. You enjoy the rest of your evening or day, whatever it is that you're doing. Louise, you just stay there and bye bye for now, folks.